So that's why there's an attitude of gratefulness that comes through. Grateful to God for making us part of his mission. Grateful to our predecessors, the confreres and sisters around the globe, as well as our benefactors and mission partners, sharing their resources and lives so generously. And I am strongly convinced that the Manila District too would be much poorer without the SVDs, without you. So all the achievements of your predecessors and everything that you contribute at this point in time. The Pope yesterday had a mass on the occasion of the 500 years of Christianity in the Philippines. And in all his simplicity, once again, I believe he really managed to get a very important message across. He somehow says Filipinos received the joy of the gospel half a millennia ago, and this joy is evident in your daily lives. We see it in your eyes, in your faces, in your songs, and in your prayers. Really beautiful what he says about the Filipinos. I want to thank you for bringing the joy to the whole world and to our Christian communities. For the witness of Filipinos, their faith witness, and through your witness, you offer discreet and hardworking presence. And in this hardworking presence, you show us the importance of our faith. So his invitation to all of us is to persevere in this work of evangelization. So the whole homily you can find in the internet. Missio gentes, that was, of course, as we know, what our society is all about. From the very beginning, we were sent to the people, gentes. The years between 2012 and 2018, since we have such a huge congregation, we have expanded. So many confreres are not aware of that, but we have expanded to 8 new countries in just 6 years. And have added work with refugees. We have massive expansions in our provinces, regions, and missions, and in many of our apostolates. We have entered countries like Uganda, Latvia, Albania, Liberia, Norway, French Guiana, in Brazil, northern part, and then Myanmar and Bangladesh. We have a tremendous contribution with about 6,000 members in 84 countries at this point in time, missio gentes. You know that the document, Gentes, a very important document of the Second Vatican Council, was drafted in our center in Nemi. Accordingly, the center was called and is being called Centro Gentes. Many of us have spent time there doing our renewal programs, etc. However, when we started in 2012, we realized we wanted to introduce a change which is crucial in our naming and talking about mission gentes. It was the European provincials who met in Roscommon in 1990, a place in Ireland. Here, the European provincials realized that if they would not become part of the first assignments, the European provinces would die. Several provinces were close to completely disappearing. So that is why the provincials in 1990 requested the General Age to also include the SVD European provinces in their first assignments. That was a tremendous move, where the society was far ahead of the official church. The propaganda fide until today has difficulties accepting Europe as a mission country. But we realize that Europe needs missionaries too. So today, 31 years later, more than 350 SVD missionaries born on other continents, especially Asia and Africa, are now working in Europe. So in that context, without these 350 missionaries, many of our provinces would be dead. It's important to know that it is because of our vision. Some 30 years ago, the European provinces are alive. So Roscommon interpreted a new vision that goes beyond the old geographical concept of mission. It's an important reinterpretation of the Second Vatican Council, namely that the whole church is missionary. So inter gentes instead of ad gentes. Ad gentes would before mean we would send missionaries from Europe to all over the world, but today we realize also missionaries from all over the world are in Europe. So that's why we talk about mission inter gentes. We realize that our way into the future can only be a way with and among the people. Pope Francis, a couple of months later after we took office, retrieved a very old formulation of the Church Fathers, known to us. Good shepherds, he says, need to have the smell of their sheep. Arnold Janssen had emphasized already how important it is to be among the people. He would say, because God has become a human being, all paths to God always lead via the human being. I must say, in my own experience traveling the SVD world, I had a chance to visit all the 84 countries and all the provinces and most of our communities worldwide. The happiest confreres, sisters and lay mission partners I found among those closest to the people. So as SVDs, we have over the past 25 years found a unique way of organizing our religious missionary communities for mission. We talk about 5 areas. We also have found a unique way of how to organize our missionary work worldwide. There are 4 characteristics. Now, many of our confreres worldwide have applied these 5 areas as well as the 4 characteristics to their own communities, to their parishes, to their schools, to other institutions. So that is what we are doing at this point in time also in Cebu. We are applying our own learnings to others. The SVD worldwide, in form of a synthesis, we have a vision. We live with just one basic question: what is it really that God wants us to do? And accordingly, we define our mission. We have defined our dialogue partners, and then we realize we have to organize ourselves first. We do not only look at our communities, at leadership, finances, and formation. Particularly, we want to talk about spirituality. But each area has to be given equal importance. Only then we can reach out, transform the world, at least contribute, involve others, and live a God-centered life. That accordingly were our action plans, congregational directions. And then in 2018, the chapter decided that we should emphasize once again our spirituality, that it is not our mission, but that we are invited to participate in God's mission. It is the love of Christ that impels us. Rooted in his work, we can commit ourselves anew to his mission. So it is these 5 areas that are crucial. So whenever we meet as districts, not only to look at leadership or community or finances or formation, but particularly also to look at spirituality. But again, all areas are equally important. And only then we can continue to reach out, to contribute, to transform our world wherever we are, involve as many as possible, and then live a God-centered life. In Cebu, we are applying that to our communities in our garbage dumps. You know that many of us are involved here in Cebu in social action, like in this central province as well, in the northern province. So we organized our community. Before we would basically look at the economic and financial aspect because the people are poor, but we realize today, if we only concentrate on the economic aspect, we are not going to change anything. So we have to address the other elements equally, meaning leadership, formation, community, and each community needs a good spirituality. It works. It is interesting. What took us 20 plus years to apply to ourselves also works in our communities. After our communities have gone through the process, then they are ready for mission themselves. They can reach out to other slums, can contribute to transform our world and involve others, and then live a God-centered life. I've seen communities in Africa, like Kenya, for example, where these principles and experiences we have in our own SVD life are being applied to communities outside, and it works very well. I've seen very active communities in South America, countries like Paraguay, for example, it works. So we have a tremendous contribution, not only by sending missionaries, but also by introducing our program to others. As SVDs, we always have a broader look at sacred scriptures. We know that the 7 sacraments are important. At the core is always Eucharist. But as SVDs and as inter-gentes missionaries, we realize the Last Judgment does not talk about how many masses we celebrated, to say it critically, but the Last Judgment will ask what you did to me. So you did it to me. If we do things and if we do not things, we did it to him. So accordingly, our action is based on faith, and faith needs to be put in action. Jesus' program, the poor play a very important role. The Samaritan cannot afford to pass by. The invitation of the Lord is to do the same, and then to become creators ourselves. Act differently, even there is a Sabbath, or there are women entrapped in red light districts. For us, it is the time to do things differently, and then to base our actions and our faith on truth. My experience over the past years, visiting so many countries, also in my own province, my own life, there surely is a need for a conversion. In our spirituality, there might be a need of a conversion to a more biblical image of God. We have seen Pope Francis preaching, his image of God is the God of compassion, not the God of power and might, but the God of compassion, and not the judge. So what kind of God are we preaching? In community, conversion is needed to what we have and do in common. Only what we do and have in common will allow us to form community, rather than what we merely do alone. That's a tendency we have in our communities worldwide, also in the Philippines. Leadership requires conversion, to take responsibility, to serve and to trust. I think we have a challenge in our communities worldwide, as well as in the Philippines. I think 90% of our confreres have a huge amount of responsibility. 8%, I believe, can do more and can take more responsibility, and 2% are irresponsible. So it's a small group, but for our leaders, that needs to be addressed and needs to be challenged. But I think we should be very happy about the 90% who are doing very well and who take a lot of responsibility, like our own parents, confreres are working 14 hours a day and really serve those they are asked to serve. In line with finances, there is a need of conversion to transparency, solidarity, and professionalism. I always have emphasized in my visits to our provinces worldwide, professionalism. That plays a very important role. We lose a lot of money each year because of the way our finances are being handled. And then in the context of initial and ongoing formation, among others, conversion faces the challenge of changing habits and learning to think out of the box. So it's difficult to change our habits, what we used to do, but very often there's no other way but to change. Talking about missio, mission, inter-gentes, we have to talk about the present pandemic. Everything has changed. We realize it in our own lives and also in the lives of those we are journeying with. This picture went around the world about a year ago. The Pope alone praying upon a platform illuminated by the faint light of 6 candelabras. We have that picture. Many of us have been in St. Peter's Square, and we know the crowds that that square can accommodate. For weeks, the Pope says, now it has been evening, now it's months. It has been a whole year already that it has been evening. Thick darkness has gathered over our squares, our streets, and our cities. It has taken over our lives. The pandemic, however, has reminded us that we are all in the same boat. Nobody's exempted. So all of us are watching the national and international news, and we realize that everything is far from over. That is why, as always, following our founder, a prayerful discernment is needed. And that is why recollections are important as impulses along the way. We need to ask again in these turbulent times, what does God want us to do? And also, what can we ask of God? And this as SVDs, as leadership teams, as communities, as individuals. And all this in a context that requires to take responsibility and to act accordingly. I think that's also the reason for your meeting as Manila District. So what is it that God wants you to do? It is not important what Father so-and-so wants to do or Brother so-and-so. It is important what you as district want to do. And ultimately, of course, what God wants us to do. The chapter talks about the love of Christ. It impels us. And then rooted in His word, we commit ourselves again to His action. It is a double meaning, Christ's love for us and our love for Christ, as we know. So if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, the final beatitude, you will find out that ultimately everything is because of Him. So it's what we do, not because we want it, but because of Him, because of me. So the ninth and final beatitude of the Sermon on the Mount puts Jesus back into the center. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against me, because of me. So this because of me is what Intergentes mission is all about. I want to repeat that and emphasize that. So sometimes we think it's our mission, and if things go wrong, we blame ourselves. But it is really God's mission. So this, because of me, is what Intergentes mission is all about. It is essential to mission and a crucial reminder to all missionaries each single day. It's because of Him that we do what we do. The Generalate last year in October had invited Father Picardal to talk about the challenges for the church and the religious in the time of COVID-19. So several points were identified. I think you could add your own elements and address them accordingly. Healing of a wounded world, promoting communion and solidarity, listening to the cry of the poor, listening to the cry of the earth, exercising the prophetic role vis-à-vis authoritarian regimes, promoting active non-violence amidst violent conflicts, facing the demographic crisis, a rapidly aging, shrinking population, addressing mass migration, and adapting to new technologies. All of us know how important these elements are, and we have, based on our own experience, based on the experiences of the Manila District, to add. And that not only in line of finances, but the situation of the crisis demands that we look at our 5 areas. How do we live our spirituality, our community life, leaders, finance, and formation? So all the 5 areas need to be addressed given the new scenario of the COVID-19 pandemic. And accordingly, we need to reach out. That again is different from what we did before. So the new situation requires of all of us a new way of reaching out. We know it requires a new way of transforming our world and involving others in living a God-centered life along the line of the 5 areas. It is interesting looking at our society. We always had critical moments and critical centuries, critical decades, critical years. The society was always involved. The First World War between 1914 and 18 was a very crucial moment for the society. Many of those priests and brothers who had received their first assignments could not leave for foreign missions. I guess also in the central province, like in the north and in the south, you would have several confreres who are overdue for their departure, but they cannot leave because of the present situation. So they are at present contributing tremendously to our missions in the Philippines. Interestingly, between 1914 and 18, what was really needed was that there were so many wounded people, so many people who suffered. So it was the needs of the people that determined the SVD's intervention. It's interesting, in 1916 already, more than 5,000 wounded and sick soldiers were taken care of in our communities, in 5 SVD lazarettes. So our communities became hospitals, field hospitals, and so many people were helped. The society never closed its eyes. The society got involved, and that is what we are asked to do at this point in time as well. It always helps to look at our individual confreres and sisters and lay partners to find inspiration, and that is what I want to do. You would know a lot about Bishop Finneman. His contribution, his inspiring example, and the way it ended. Less known, maybe, Bishop Jorge Novak. Bishop Jorge Novak, all these confreres of ours, including our sister, are up for beatification. Bishop Novak was a good friend of the present Pope. Both of them, Pope Francis Bergoglio and Bishop Novak, were provincials in their respective congregations at that time in Argentina. So they were some of the few bishops who had the courage to speak up against the dictatorship. So they would join these women demonstrating, women who had lost their sons and husbands, who had just disappeared, desaparecidos. And that is where these two bishops then became very famous. So Jorge surely has a very unique contribution. Marian Selasek, a Polish confrere, he survived a concentration camp in Auschwitz. He was in one of these famous barracks. So I visited later on his life work in Puri in India. It is just amazing. During his time, when it was not sure whether he would survive the concentration camp, he made a vow to God that if he would get out of that alive, he would dedicate his life fully to God, once more fully to God, being religious already. Then he went to India and lived among Hindus. He lived in a Hindu leper colony. There were no Christians, he was the only Christian. So he lived with the Hindus. For the Hindus, he has become a saint already long ago. And he put up these tremendous services to the Hindu lepers. A very touching example. Then Maria Michaela, you would remember, the co-foundress of the Pink Sisters, reminding us in our daily lives how important our contemplative dimension is of our existence and of our life. There are many others known and not so much known among the SVDs, alive, but also those who have died already. Many of us have become SVDs because of examples of these men and women, and many of us, including myself, are still SVDs because of these men and women. So there are 22 SVD martyrs of Polish and German origin. Here you have the details. All confreres who are up for beatification. We do not know what will happen in the next future. Confreres who were alive, whom I still met, Father Joseph Koh. I'm not sure whether you ever heard his name, but I had to visit to Shandong. So Father Koh, born in 1920 then, at that time 96 years old, asked for an appointment. He was 96 years old. So when I arrived with the provincial, first of all, jokingly, he scolded the provincial. He told the provincial, "You did not answer my email." Can you imagine? At the age of 96, he has an email account. Then he started to share his life with me. He was born in 1920, and then at one time he committed a major sin, the sin that brought him into jail. The major crime, the sin that he committed, was that he applied for the SVDs. He wanted to join the society. He ended up in jail for 25 years. At one stretch, he was in jail for 20 years, and out of these 20 years, 8 years in solitary confinement. He was not allowed to sleep. He was brought out for tortures at night. And then after 20 years, he was released, came to the Philippines, and then after 1 year, the superiors called him back to China to help with the formation, and he was put back in jail again for another 5 years. So he says, "It was my faith that put me in jail. it was also my faith that helped me to continue living afterwards. I was really touched by his story and also by the way he lived his life. And the stories about Father Kur. By now he died already. So when I left Shandong, he came to me, he gave me a huge and big hug, and he told me that if you want to stay in contact with me, you can contact me anytime via Facebook. Can you imagine? The senior confrere, 96 years old, such a life of suffering and torture. He has a Facebook. One of our sisters, Veronica Rakova, we have heard about the tragic incident. I had met her just 2 months before she went back to South Sudan. My simple question to her was, are you not afraid to go back to South Sudan? And this is what she said, as an inter-gentes missionary, my love for the people is greater than my fear. And that is exactly what happened. I had visited her earlier in South Sudan. She had built up a tremendous facility to help the poor, particularly those suffering with HIV/AIDS and those suffering from tuberculosis. Now she died. She was murdered by young soldiers. She became a living example for many of the sisters, for all of us in the Arnoldus family, how often our Lord challenges and uses us as instruments in such a way that we even can lose our lives. Brother Beatus, he's still alive, born in 1932. I met him in Indonesia and Timor. He shared a very unique story. When he came to Indonesia, Timor, so when he arrived, he was told by the provincial he should work in one of the offices. So what they used to do with brothers who would come to foreign missions, helping out in offices, helping out in our communities, and he challenged the provincial at that time, of 1932. He told the provincial, you have two options. Either you let me work with the people, or you can send me home. So the provincial, I guess, was a wise man. He allowed him to work with the people. So when I met him, the good brother was more than 80 years old already, and people were celebrating his life work. More than 4,000 young people had received professional training, and he had put up a lot of schools and a lot of infrastructure that would serve very poor and simple people. What did he do? He went from place to place in the mountains, in poor places, and befriended the people, and together with the people, he managed to build up all these beautiful people that are now young professionals, who in turn have helped others again. Again, an example of a happy missionary, inter gentes, a missionary among the people. Another example, Father Claus Schnewer. In the Central Province, when I was in office in Rome, I used to pass by at least twice a year to visit our senior conference. The oldest then was Peter Michael. Now, Father Klaus Schnewer, I met in 2018 in Germany. So I told him he's not allowed to die. He has to break a record, namely the record of Peter Michael, which he did. So Father Klaus Schnewer is the oldest ever living SVD. At the age of 106, he died. Father Klaus Schnewer is very unique. He was assigned to a parish, and the provincial had a hard time to pull him out, not only because of him, but also because of the people. They did not want to let him go. He spent his whole life inter gentes. So when I met him in St. Wendell's, he was a little irritated and a little angry at the rector of the house and the provincial. He said, they pulled me out at the age of 100. Look at me, I can still work. So then I was told later by the rector what Father Schnewer did. Without telling anybody, he called the chancellor of the diocese. And he told him, I am a Divine Word Missionary, and I'm looking for a job. So the secretary got excited, having a very experienced missionary applying for an assignment in the diocese. So she filled in the formula, and when it came to that portion where he had to reveal his age, he said, I'm 104 years old. Oh, the secretary got scared. She said, I have to talk to the bishop first. We cannot continue. So at the age of 104, he still applied for an assignment. You see how much he was in love with his work as missionary. I guess it's very similar for all of us. It's very difficult to retire. But here you have a man with a good sense of humor who really did not want to let go. So you see the tremendous commitment, a commitment that makes people happy. Sometimes I feel that also the younger confreres of us, I'm not part of that anymore, retired, senior confrere, but especially the younger confreres, to realize the commitment that makes us happy, the commitment that has built up our society. So a tremendous commitment that I'm sure all of you in the Manila District have. So asked for an advice for the coming SVD generations, he simply told me, tell everybody, stay close to God and close to the people. So that's the advice I also pass on to you. Pope Francis, again, took us by surprise not yesterday, but the previous Sunday, where he was still in Iraq. You have seen the picture of this Alan Kurdi, a young child, a young boy, dead on the seashore. So the Pope visited the father, Francis. So Pope Francis visited Abdullah Kurdi, the father of the little boy, just to condole with him. So with all the things that he had to do, all the things on his mind, he was concerned about an individual family, an individual father who was suffering. The father had lost his 2 children and his wife on that boat trip. So he took extra time off, and I think that's important in our time of the COVID-19, not to overlook those who are really suffering. That's a wise man once said, prophets are those who still feel the pain of the people. So not to pass by, but people who are really in tremendous pain because of the losses that have occurred and because of their unique suffering, especially now in the time of the pandemic. That is what we can learn again from Pope Francis. I was asked many times, what is it that touched you most during your visits? These are simple answers that came to my mind. It is the encounter with very committed confreres, communities and sisters doing extraordinary and oftentimes heroic work. So I've given you a few examples, and I'm sure we have them in our own provinces, in our own districts too. The Manila District, to repeat that, would be much poorer without the SVDs, without you. And based on that, I think we can be grateful and continue our work. The positive feedback coming quite frequently from the people we serve. Many people, really many people, love our missionaries and are grateful for their day-to-day selfless services. And then the dedication and sense of ownership of our lay mission partners. That's a blessing for many, many decades to come. The 18th General Chapter, we talk about a new commitment to his mission inter gentes. So we are committed to the primary option of Jesus, the poor, the marginalized, the broken, the captives, the sick, the oppressed. So that's our spiritual foundation. The spiritual foundation in the Word impels us to make our missionary commitment and to put the last first. So this mission is non-negotiable. We want to stress the situation of family and young people, and we want to care for the environment and nature. So that is our chapter document. It's a very simple message. In the midst of our sufferings at this point in time, we want to take care of the people. We want to be close to the people. So in ending, we live in a time when much is collapsing, Arnold Janssen said, and new things must be established in their place. That's our time again. And that is why discernment is needed. What does God want us to do? Discern, also that's the invitation for your district, discern what the Holy Spirit wants from each of us and our communities, as district and as a whole society. So I'll end with a prayer. Arnold Janssen would pray, give us courage and enthusiasm to spend our lives in the service of your good news of love. Help us to follow you faithfully and to be enthusiastic witnesses of your good news, and this not only through words, but very simply through our being. May our whole life and being radiate love and joy. So maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. So thank you very much, indeed gratitude.